Hello, future viewers! We've got more Battle Engine Aquila, and this is where things start getting more difficult. The boss fight that you just saw was not very impressive, right? We're gonna have to turn things up after something like that. Well, that's not gonna happen right away, but trust me, it'll happen in this video. This is a shorter mission, and it's pretty much the only chance we'll have to use the Lancer loadout this video, so that's what I'm gonna do. This is actually not a bad map for this loadout because the ground opposition you're fighting is, well, it's mostly these things. They don't put too much of a fight up.
Incoming missile.
I'm just too good.
Weapon overheating.
Pretty much the only trouble they might give you is being smaller targets than they might appear. A fair amount of your rank does depend on how quickly you clear them out, though, so it helps if you have better aim than I do. Also, the blaster weapon is actually pretty handy here.
Weapon overheating.
It locks on fast and it does enough damage to deal with them reasonably quickly.
Commencing final landing approach.
Vulcan
Gamma
control.
here. We're in position and awaiting clearance to land.
Now, I do have some buildings to destroy, and the beam laser is not great, but fortunately the torpedo is just fine.
Weapon overheating.
Man, the paintwork!
Flux missile.
Also, the flux missile, for some reason, does not aim at where your crosshair is aimed when you blind fire it, which is a little annoying. But it's no big deal. Aside from clearing out the beach quickly, you preserve your rank by preventing your allied landing forces from taking a lot of casualties. And that's the lock-on beam laser as it's supposed to be used, more or less. It's best when the enemy is kind of bunched up in a circle instead of spread out in a long line, but that's pretty rare. So don't hurt yourself trying to find situations like that.
Under Fawcetti control. Radar reports enemy bomber units approaching from the north.
Beam
Don't let
laser.
those bombers reach our forces. I'm busted up real bad.
Augmented.
Like this. This is not bad.
Incoming warhead.
Also, we are starting to see enemy walkers more often. They're, I guess, tech level 2 of Muspel ground forces. They are more durable.
Flux missile.
They fire a little bit more often, but they don't seem to hit too much harder than the tanks.
Incoming.
The main defense they have is if you're using grenades, they have trouble getting the correct firing arc on them, and will sometimes just fire way up into the air where it couldn't possibly hit anything. Well, I will accept A ranks without a problem. Pretty much the only time that I might redo a map due to rank would be a C, maybe. And this map, this one, as much as I like to show off the more unorthodox builds, for this one I pretty much have to use Pulsar. This is the first map that I would say is a little bit unreasonable. I tried experimenting with a few approaches, but unfortunately only one seemed viable for keeping a decent number of allied vehicles intact. That annoys me a little bit when it gives me this fairly large, broad battlefield, but it turns out that only one particular approach works. Also, Casbah is very helpful here. I wish I had an air-to-ground beam laser build. That thing looks pretty cool. And both Casbah and the Venture uses it, so apparently it's not entirely impractical for them to use. Oh well. So we have a new kind of enemy artillery here. Those rocket trucks. There's more of them, and they deal roughly the same amount of damage, but they are not as good at taking punishments, so there's that. And one of the reasons that those lock-on missiles are so useful here is that when you have severe need to just kill a couple of things and then move on, once you know how many missiles it takes to destroy something, you can just fire them off and move on. You don't have to wait to see if the attack connects, as long as you're not targeting something that's really agile. So it's convenient on a map where convenience is actually pretty important. The only thing to watch out for is that if you're chasing an air unit, you have to catch up with it a bit, because otherwise your missiles might burn out, run out of range, whatever you want to call it.
Radar reporting friendly contacts to the southwest. Looks like the air support, sir.
Well, friendly air support actually matters here. Also, there's a reason that I was a little stingy with my missiles for these last couple of bombers. I'm gonna need my missiles for a little bit later.
I'm busted up real bad.
Killing a fighter or two and maybe destroying a salmon placement can help lengthen the amount of time that you have your helpers support, but overall there's not a whole lot you can do. Because of the problems with the grenades, I tend to use pulse cannons on the walkers whenever I can get away with it. And as before, once you get a hold of the initial situation, it's just a matter of going back and forth and pushing the enemy back every now and then. By the way, it helps to look at that reinforcements clock in the upper right. Fortunately, that's not a timer for enemy reinforcements, although not so helpfully. That's pretty much because enemy reinforcements are assumed to be happening all the time. And as in last video, it's important to check for infantry because our own vehicles don't target them very well. Although we do have some friendly infantry, so at least it'll be okay if you let one squad of the lightly armed ones through. Although just as a matter of policy, you know, maybe if they're right in front of you, go ahead and shoot them anyway. Also, things become easier when our air support arrives because they have some pretty strong bombers with them. And that's why you have to keep an eye on reinforcements. If you're too far forwards when that happens, you might not be able to reach these bombers in time. Also, that's why it's good to have at least 60 missiles left. And that just about covers it for this mission. This is a mission that took me a few tries to get down. And as much as I would like to be able to use the spread bomb and torpedo against the many ground targets here, the speed and convenience of the lock-ons won out here. Although if someone else comes up with a different strategy that provides a good rank, I would love to see it. I think a little bit of it comes to luck as well, because I think the actions of your allies change a little bit depending on luck.
Vulcan cannon.
Or at least things that are not reasonably within your control.
Grenade.
Yeah, so dealing with tanks quickly at kind of short range seems to be the best use I found for grenades. Well, except for destroying buildings. It's good for that too.
Excellent work. Soon this island will be back under center control.
And there it is. That's one of the tougher missions to get a secondary objective on. Just because the vehicles you're defending are so fragile. It seems like every time an enemy fires, one of your vehicles is destroyed. And, well, let's break out the spread bomb again. Although for a somewhat different reason than before. So the game doesn't spend a whole lot of time explaining this, but I believe that this is the next big delivery for the landing force that we were establishing a beachhead for during the last couple of missions. Now it seems a little cumbersome to not be able to use guided missiles for these bombers here. But fortunately, they're far enough away from your convoy and few enough in numbers that you can get away with this sort of thing. Although I did cut it a little bit close with finding a place to land.
Blast. Grenade.
Unfortunately, my grenades do not quite have that much range on them.
Spread. Spread.
Now, the important thing here is to destroy the front and the two back guns here quickly. Because those are the weapons that they use to fire on the Marshal and the convoy at long range.
Vulcan cannon.
Also, the game says, oh, the Marshal is here, they'll be able to help you out. But mostly all they do by showing up is provide another thing that you have to defend. And that's why I left the first battleship before sinking it. There just wasn't enough time to do that and defend everything that needed defending. But now that that crisis is over, I can just go in and... Oh wow, okay. Never mind, I didn't even need to do that. So that was pretty nice. And now we've got ourselves a second boss battle. This one is a bit more in line with what boss battles are going to be like in this game. I also have some buildings to destroy, so the spread bomb build seems pretty good here.
This is the final push, son. Help our boys in any way you can.
We are receiving disturbing reports of a superweapon on the north of the island.
This time we don't have to worry as much about our allied units, so we can just let those walkers go. And I'd like to conserve at least some of my spread bomb and grenade ammo, so it's the pulse cannon for this thing. And it's very helpful to be able to attack these buildings from the air because there is a super weapon there and it will shoot at you while you're walking around on the ground, so you're a lot safer attacking the buildings this way.
Incoming missile.
You do have to be careful about where you land, because there are a lot of enemy units, and they can hit you quickly enough that you don't even have the energy to take off again if you're not careful. By the way, although the super weapon can act as artillery, as long as you're nearby, it'll try to aim at you instead. So you don't have to worry that much about your allies getting knocked out.
Incoming missile.
It is also pretty helpful to take out some of the tanks, because once you land and start fighting this thing, the tanks will start to chase after you a little bit.
Pulse cast.
Now, the weak point of this thing is very small. It's kind of the center of that
Grenade. Pulse.
that rotary gun. Now, the beam laser would be very nice for hitting a small target like that accurately, but there's a reason that I'm not going with that.
Grenade. Pulse cannon operating. Incoming missile.
Also, if the gun looks like it's going to get a little too close to getting a good shot on you, you can just take off and not have to worry about it. Although, you know, I didn't really notice what exactly was hitting me there, but most likely it was a couple of tanks or something. That's a little bit of a problem.
Grenade. Pulse cannon.
Ooh, yeah, that's very risky. And I know for a fact that I was not hit by the full volley, because that'll kill you no matter how much health you have. Now we have phase 2, and that's why you have to conserve your grenades, because unlike the last boss, there's no special weak point that you can hit to deal enough damage to kill this thing quickly. And the amount of distance that you have to keep between this thing and yourself is a little finicky.
Hopefully that should be it for the surprises.
If you're too close, you won't even be able to move out of the way of its stuff. But too far, and its turret will track you better. Anyway, that's done. But we're not quite finished here. Not yet. I did mention a couple of times, both in comments and when talking about this game as a possibility for this channel, that there's goody stuff. I showed off a little bit of the concept art, but now here's a couple of unit breakdowns. This is another thing that I like. I'm not going to waste your time by showing off all the units, but their basic tank units are good examples of the general strategy of these two factions. Here we have a light, fairly agile tank unit. This definitely seems like the sort of thing that you would use for harassing the enemy backlines, maybe, or getting some good flanking maneuvers. Like the sort of thing that you sneak by and attack enemy artillery, or I guess, worker units in an RTS. And on the other side, once I find it, these guys. These are the guys that I've been shooting up pretty much all the time as soon as I remember to use the left mouse button and not the right one to move these things around manually. So this one is a slow, heavily armored piece of machinery. And it's obviously designed to be kind of masked up and sent to at the enemy's front line for, busting down walls and doors and whatever else is in the way. Of course, in most of the situations that you encounter in Battle Engine Aquila, that is exactly what has happened, and the units that are not really made for a straight-up fight have to enter a straight-up fight, which is why if you don't do something, you're going to lose by a lot. Kind of makes me wonder if there are other conflicts going on where the Forsetti doctrine actually won out. The enemy didn't mess up the numbers they needed, and that's why your attention isn't required there. Would have been nice for them to flesh that out. Oh well. See you next time.